Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's lesson, we're going to be creating something that's not really realistic. We're going to be painting a cat's eye. We're going to punch it up with some color and some texture. You think texture and an eye? What are we doing? I'm going to be using some heavy gel medium to build up the form of an eye. Not too much, but just to show you a different way that you can take, just take this painting study and experiment. Instead of painting something flat, we're going to add a little bit of dimension to it. Typically cat's eyes, and this can go for any animal really. I'm just using a cat's eye because this was a request from somebody. And cat's eyes are usually, depending on color, yellow, blue. Chaoses are kind of like a yellowy green, but for this particular lesson I went to Pixabay and I found a picture of a cat. It looks like a tabby, but I think the photograph was turned to black and white, then the eye was punched up with a really bright green. So I thought we're going to use that because it's not really realistic, but it's actually a photograph. Now you know I don't like working from photographs, I prefer working from life, but when it comes to animals, they don't sit still, so you got to work from a photograph. Okay, so I did some prep work ahead of time just to save on time. Now I'm going to grab my phone. So I went to pixabay.com and I downloaded some photographs onto my phone. So I can see here, beautiful white cat with green eyes. This is possibly realistic. Nice black cat with green eyes, and that's a really nice study right there. The one I'm working from is this one here. I don't know if this is realistic. I'm thinking probably not. Because of the fur, the way that the fur is, the values of the fur, it almost looks like it was photoshopped. But we're going to be using that for our study. And when painting the eye, actually any feature, even a person, when you're working from a photograph, when you look at this, you go, oh, it's so much. But once you actually get the sketch down, I like doing a crop like that, and that way my mind and my hand, they talk to each other and they're focused on one element. So taking this, what do? I'm not going to print it because the color is better on my phone. You can use a tablet or computer as well. Then it's going to be printing it out on a printer. I like this. So what I did is I used my lineless grid system, and the blue cardstock is just for video purposes. And I actually put my phone underneath it and I lined it up. And then I took the 1:1 grid and then I put my big sheet of tracing paper on there. Then I copied in the squares, so you can do that too. And then I cut this out, and then that came up with this sketch. And then you can adjust how big or how small you want it. So from there, and there's a video on this, so I'm not going to explain it. Then from there I transferred it over to the thing, so it's in perfect proportions. You can sketch it out freestyle, but when it comes to eyes and proportions, I've been doing this for such a long time, I still use the grid. But you use it less and less for the larger forms, but it's when you're working on the proportions where you can't make mistakes. So that's what I use. So I'm going to be using my phone as reference for this. So I'm just going to blow it up about that size. And then I'll put it somewhere, not sure where. You know what's going to happen? Yeah, it's going to fall into my paint. Well, let's see what happens. All right, for the paint. So I have my DIY Stay Wet palette already prepared. And I'm going to be using, I'm going to be using DecoArt Traditions Phthalo Green Yellow. Now, if you don't have Phthalo Green Yellow, just use a Phthalo Green Blue and to add a little bit of extra yellow to it. If you don't have Phthalo Green, use Phthalo Blue and make a green with that. I've got a gazillion color mixing courses and lessons available, so you can refer to one of those. So Phthalo Green Yellow, Permanent Alizarin Crimson, Hansa Yellow Light, and Titanium White. So we're going to be painting the eye just with these colors. And quickly take this. I've got some extender and blending medium. I'm not a fan of thinning down paint so much when creating something more fine art because if you use too much water, you'll break down the strength of the pigment. Although this is just a painting study, I like to get into the mindset of what I'm going to be doing with it. And the extender and blending medium, it's not expensive, and you only need a drop or two. So it's a worthwhile investment. You can use matte medium as well. And when I start painting, I'm actually going to be using the DecoArt Media Heavy Gel Medium as an experiment. It's all about experimenting. That's what the painting studies are for. I'm using just regular, plain old, cheapy mixed media paper. Nothing fancy, although that I did prime it with Gesso. Yeah, I did. I primed it with Gesso. It's curling. It's super thin, just to show you, how it would work. So, DecoArt Media Gesso. I put it onto my palette. I thinned it down with some water. I would say on a scale of 0 being water and 10 being pure Gesso, I thinned it down to about a 5, so about half, so it was fluid. Use a large number 1 glazing brush, and I put 2 thin layers on there, and just to get there, dried it. And then I went to get my sandpaper to sand it to make it smooth. I don't know if Joe took it. I doubt it because he's got his own stuff, so I don't know. I probably misplaced it. So I took some old tracing paper and I just rubbed it, and it's pretty smooth. So it's an emergency. Yeah, I remember back about 25 years ago, I was doing sanding with a brown paper bag. Brushes, I've got a liner brush and some round brushes. Size doesn't matter, except that use what's comfortable for you. A 10-0 liner brush, and I've got number 2, 4, and 5 round. So we're going to work with that. All right, and these are the Majestic brushes. So first thing I'm going to do, look at my photograph. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to outline everything. So we're going to what? Outline, the outline in the photograph is black. I wonder if I should put this closer. I'll link the picture so you can get it for yourself. So it's black. I wonder if I can do this without getting paint on it. We don't have black. Well, we don't need black because we can take Phthalo green yellow and Alizarin crimson. We just need to make a chromatic black. You want to see the true underlying color, just add a little bit of white. Look at that. That's perfect. I don't think I've made a chromatic black that nice before. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to outline. And I added, so to these puddles of paint, I added 2 drops of the extender and blending medium. So I'm just lightly getting the line here. It's almost like doing another sketch. And then up here it's going to be, this is going to be dark. And I'm dry brushing this, so you notice I didn't reload my brush. This is just a study. And the study is about the inner eye color. That's what the study's for. And ideally when I'm doing that is I'm just getting rid of the graphite. There we go. And just because you put the extender into the paint, I'm still going to use water to dampen my brush. That's not going to change. Make sure though that when you, and I'm bad for this, when you rinse your brush, don't do it over your painting obviously, but wipe the water off the ferrule because I'm getting a little bit bad for that. All right, so I'm going to take that now and I'm going to get that in there. Because we're using, this brush is breaking. This brush is going to have to be replaced soon. These are the brushes I use for my portraits, and this one's really worn because the technique I'm going to show you is a bit rough on brushes. So having a worn brush, a worn synthetic brush for the technique I'm going to show you is good. So even though it's breaking down, I'm still going to keep it. Now what I was going to say is because we made up a chromatic black with alizarin crimson and phthalo green, which are more transparent colors. Depending on the brand that you're using, if I was using the fluid acrylics, well, first of all, the fluid acrylics don't have alizarin crimson, so I would have made it with quinacridone burnt orange and quinacridone magenta, transparent colors. I would have had to probably put two layers to make this chromatic black. But this one's actually not too bad. But if you only want single coverage and you want it fast, you can just use carbon black. Black though, if you use carbon black, ivory black, bone black, any of those pure blacks in a large format, the painting kind of looks flat. There is a time and a place to use them. Right now, just not in my world. Okay, so we got that in there. And I'm going to take that paint again, and I'm just going to make a little bit of an adjustment on the shape here. This is pure black here. We can fill that in after. All right. So, actually, why don't we, while we're here, let's extend this out like that. Might as well do this now because this paint will be dry by the time I come to use it. So I'm just using my airplane stroke, touch, push, lift. And again, I've got classes on doing animal fur and all that stuff, so you can refer to those. To get the green of the eye is one thing. Because we're working with transparent colors, I also want to put all those striations in the eye. I'm not going to copy that exactly. I'm going to make up something similar. So I can take the chromatic black here, and this is where it gets a little bit rough. And I'm just going to pat it on the paper towel. And the brush is, that's why I'm using this brush, because it is for doing this type of stuff. Because I use this brush more flat than pointed, where I run into some problems when I really want a fine point on it. Sometimes it doesn't give that to me. So I've just got that in there. Now this has to dry 100% when I get my heat gun. And I'm going to go to a larger, I'm going to go to actually the largest brush. And I'm going to grab some Hansa Yellow Light. And I need to test this first. I know what needs to be done, but I want to make sure that I don't cover up the black, and I don't. Take a speck of water. My brush wasn't totally wet. I'm just going to paint the entire layer here of yellow. Entire layer here, the entire eye. Now I can cover up the black here because I can always go back and add another layer of black. That's not a problem. And this, really, the technique is the same. You just have to change up the colors. Let's say if you want your animal to have, let's say, a blue eye or a red eye. It doesn't matter. The technique is the same. Okay, that also has to dry. So I'm going to get the gun again. Now you can let this air dry yourself. But now what I want to do is this is where I'm going to start building up my layers. Now I typically would use glazing medium, but I want to try with the heavy gel medium. And I'm going to use the small brush for this. This does have some drying time. So what I'm doing now is I'm basically building up the layer, adding that in here, letting it dry, then painting another layer, letting it dry. So the more layers that you put of a barrier layer, it allows more light to shine through, and the whatever it is, the object is much more luminescent. And I have glazing medium, the DecoArt glazing medium, but I wanted to experiment to see if we could do the same thing with this heavy gel medium. Okay, so that's that. And I'm going to let this dry. It only takes a few seconds, not few seconds, a few minutes, so 3-4 minutes. And I'm going to take the brush again. And now what I'm going to take some of the green and a little bit of the yellow. And what I'm looking for is, well, kind of a neon-y green, because we're going to be toning that down too if we need to. So I've got a bit of a neon-y green here. I'm going to wipe out most of it on the paper towel. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to pounce, pounce, pounce. You notice I'm not worried about covering up the black fur because black, the chromatic black can cover this up so easily. But it goes in reverse. So let's pretend that you're painting the eye black and the fur green. Taking green and covering black, much more difficult. You would have to base it with white and then paint it again. So that's pretty good. So now I'm going to dry it again. Again, you don't have to use a heat gun. You can just let it dry on its own. And I'm going to get the medium again, put another layer. And with this, I probably would do this, and it's kind of hard because I like to say focus on one thing. Because there's so much drying time involved, the thicker you put this on, I think I just spit on my paper. The thicker that you put on the medium, the longer it does take to dry. So keep that in mind. Again, this is just an experiment because I want to see how it works. So now what I can do is in the middle is build up the thickness. And Chaos is the one that actually inspired this project because I was watching The Ranch on Netflix last night, and she climbs onto me, and she was perched like this on here, and then she was looking at me, and then Joe sneezed, and she turned her head, and I swear I could see right through her eyeball because looking on a profile, the eye goes like this. I swear I could see through the eyeball. I went, holy crap, is that ever cool? Because she doesn't usually let me get that close to manipulate her to study her because then she goes, hey. But turning her head, and I thought that was really neat. So that's what's inspired this. So this, although this painting study is a quick study, again, like everything, it's all about the drying time. And I think we're now almost, we're at 17, I'm looking at the counter, we're at 17 minutes into the project. Now one thing what we could have done as well is tint the medium with paint. So I'm going to do that. And it will dry transparent. I'm just going to add a little bit more, and I'm doing this pity pad. And I need to deepen this a little bit more. It's not quite deep enough, actually. See if I can get some chromatic black in there. Ooh, too much. At the top, we're going to glaze the shadow here. And it looks a little bit dark here. And although here it's just green, I want to punch it up with a lot more yellow. And all these transparent layers I'm working with, all the underlying strokes are showing through. Rinse that. I'm going to take a little bit more medium. I want to build a little bit more texture in here. And now that I think about it, the liquid glass would have been perfect for this at the end because the way you squeeze it out, it really stays there. This does as well, but because it's coming out of a bottle, it levels out a little bit. That would have been nice for that. See this, you still see the brush strokes. And to me, I don't mind seeing brush strokes. That just shows to me when I'm looking at artwork that it was actually painted. I don't know if you can see. There we go. You can see it being built up. All right. Dry it. Now the other thing I'm doing is I'm not letting it fully dry. You should let it dry as you're working through it. Now I'm going to do a little bit of shadowing. So I'm going to take I think I put that a little bit close there. And some of you may say, well, why don't I just zoom in? When you zoom in, I find that when you zoom in too close, people are spending more time looking at strokes and technique. I want you to see the whole thing being built up. All right, so I'm going right in there, a little bit of, right into the existing mix, create my chromatic black again, patting on a paper towel. Just creating that shadow now. Right over the glaze. And I need to put a little bit more striations in there. That's kind of nice texture. So I'm just going to little bit of pity pat in there. And while that's still wet, I'm going to take some Hansa Yellow Light. And right in there. And the other thing to keep in mind is the more layers of paint you put on, it does get a little bit darker. So this is where I'm adjusting this. I want the eye to be a lot brighter than that. I'm going to go to my little liner brush now. To that thin paint while it's wet, and I'm just going to do light little scribbles. This is for the striations. Make sure this is really thin. You want this to be wiggly. It's very subtle. This line here is going to be black, so I'm going a little bit further into the eye. There's a little, all those little veiny lines. There we go. I'm just watching there. So I'm going to let that dry naturally. So I'm going to make a bit more chromatic black. That, I think, I'm going to take some white because I need to see the true underlying color there. Yep, that's good. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to outline this properly because it was just a sketch before. A speck of water to make the paint a bit more fluid. If I was using the fluid acrylics, I wouldn't need to thin it down as much because the paint's already fluid. So that's also a good idea using the fluid acrylics if you don't want to spend so much time thinning it. The paints are more transparent, obviously. And using these liner brushes, they take a lot longer because they don't hold a lot of paint. Therefore, super structured detail. Okay. And there's a little one here. Let's see, where are we here? I didn't sketch this line out. I'm gonna have to get another brush to do that. Just gonna put a light layer there. Alrighty, I'm going to get a smaller brush. This is just the fur here. And I'm going to get some titanium white. This is where the eye is wet here. It's also a little bit wet here. Okay. Typically in the corner too, you have something there. I'm going to put another layer of chromatic black on in the eye. Oh, a little bit, oopsie. A little bit of medium as well. And it looks, I'm actually going to cover that highlight. It looks funny right now because the gloss medium hasn't dried yet. It holds the brush strokes really, really well. I'm really impressed by how this holds strokes. I'm going to put a little bit more in. a flat brush. A flat brush. Be a little bit easier. Whoops, I went over the eye and I grabbed some of the black. I'm gonna grab a little bit more yellow right on the brush. I'm just gonna put a little bit more yellow here. All right. Let me show you the close up there. So you can see all that texture in there. And from here now, it's just when it dries, I just gotta fix this here. When it dries, it's going to be completely transparent. And before I finish anything, it's taking the white paint and coming in with that highlight. There we go. Let me just bring a little bit more here. Just put some more fur here. Again, this is super fast. And we just hit that bottom part with the heat gun. You see with the paper, because this paper's thin, it's really buckling. So that's something I can keep in mind for the future. A little bit of a tone in here. Where are we? When you're doing the painting study, you can put a lot more fur in here. I wanted this study to be about the eye, not about the fur. Just to get something placed in here. There we go. This is darker for here, but you have the photograph, so you can also do it yourself. And you go from there. So with this now, again, waiting for it to dry is always a bugger. Waiting for it to dry and then putting a final layer of the medium if I wanted to. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to do that because this is just an experiment. But the paper is really flimsy. Let's see if I can turn this. See, I can't even flatten it out. I have to wait for that to dry. But you can see that it's been built up a little bit there. All right. So now what I want to do is, while this is drying, let me put that aside. I want to show you another one that I did. Exactly the same, just use a different photograph without the medium. You can see the difference, that the acrylics dry a little bit darker. I'll put the highlights in a little bit different places. I was actually going for the eye of a lizard, and then as I was painting, my mind went through to the class I'm teaching. It was an abstract cat eye, and my mind went to that, and then I started painting the shape of a cat. Like, I was doing so many painting studies for that workshop. So, but again, doesn't matter the animal, you're just changing the shape of the eye. Think of it just shapes. So again, same thing, striations. This is without any glazing medium at all. So it'll be interesting that once this is dry, we'll be able to compare the two and see what we get. Welcome back. I've let this dry, let it dry overnight, and it turned out a lot better than I expected. You can see I'm just lifting it up here so you can see that nice texture. So I'm thinking the next time I want to try this as a study, I may actually look at using triple thick or maybe some liquid glass because it's self-leveling. So the heavy gel medium is meant more for impasto, where if you took a palette knife and went like this and lifted up, the strokes would go up, or the medium would go up and it would stay like that. So I'm looking for something a little bit more leveling, but this actually turned out pretty nice. So I can think of different applications for this. And just to show you the one without the medium, so you can see that it's flat. So for the purpose of an abstract, I kind of like this effect, but for the purpose of a fine art portrait, I prefer the flat finish. All right, so I hope that you learned a little bit in this painting study about different ways to use the like a medium to create art for different applications and stuff like that. And if you have some, give it a try, and I would love to know what you've come up with your experiments. Even if something you tried doing and it didn't work, but it could work for something else, like a happy accident, share in the comments below and let me know, because we can all learn from each other. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I'm off to prepare my next lesson. And until I see you then, stay inspired.